Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our show, my little drum roll, is
Hello, I'm Jenny Wall, and I'm in the math department at Northwest, the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. And I am a professor of math education. So I work with pre-service teachers. That means people who are at Northwest to learn how to be teachers. And I also work with in-service teachers. That means people who are already graduated in teaching and coming back to get their master's degree in mathematics as well.
thank you, Jenny, for being a guest on our show.
Those
I'm very
highly sought
excited.
after math ed students. I can't tell you the number of times we hear from school districts, you got any math ed students? We really need math teachers. So
And
if
it's
you want
like
to be
they
a
think
teacher,
they're
kids, be a
hiding.
math teacher. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they think we've got extras in the back room or
Yeah.
something. But there,
Yeah.
I used to joke that there is not a such thing as a retired math teacher in Northwest Missouri because if they retire, they just get called back into teaching. And now I say there's not really hardly even a student teacher, math teacher in Northwest Missouri because they get hired to be teachers before they've even student taught. So if you've got any inkling to teach math, you're highly sought after.
We can give you a job tomorrow.
We'll be fought
Exactly.
after. Yeah.
But this is also
Yes.
good, I think, because this answers some of the questions again that we get from school districts and that we get from students, specifically us in career services, as Travis was mentioning. Where are your students? We want to hire math teacher students. Like, where are they? And we're like, well, we've given them all away. They're
Exactly.
already working. So, um, I just want to put that out there in the universe. Like, they are highly sought after people. So, could you start maybe from the beginning of your journey to getting to where you're working today and kind of explain to us how you got to be a math educator? Is that meth
Yes.
educator squared? I don't know what that
Yes.
is.
Yes. Good job. Um, I I would say if you kind of sum up everything, it is taking advantage of opportunities. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I've gotten here. Because all along the way, I've just kind of like, oh, that sounds good. I'll do that. And so it started at my freshman year of high school. I was taking geometry, not honors geometry, because I took algebra as an eighth grader, and I was like, phew, that was a lot of work. I'm just going to start coasting. I don't need to do all that extra work. And my high school geometry teacher said, do you want to try teaching? Do you want to teach a lesson next week? And I was like, to who? And he said, to your class. So that for a week, I went, instead of being in class with my classmates, I went to the math department room or whatever and just studied for the upcoming section he was going to have me teach. And I taught, and it was fun and it went well. And so, pretty much from that point on, I thought I'm going to be a math teacher.
And that was as a
I,
freshman in high school?
yes, a freshman in high school.
Crazy.
Yeah. But I also took Spanish in high school and loved taking Spanish. So I had an opportunity as a high school student to study abroad. It was an exchange program, and it was during the summer. And I went and lived with a family for a month, and then their daughter came and lived with us for a month. So that was fun, and I improved my Spanish speaking.
Where did you
So
go? Did you go to Spain? Did you go
I
to
did to Barcelona, a little village outside Barcelona. It was magical. I loved it. And I'm still really good friends with the daughter of that family. Yeah. So then I came to Northwest because at that time we had a desktop computer in every residence hall room.
That was a big deal. Like,
That was
I
a
Oh,
don't think
big
yep. We
students
were all
deal.
raised on the
understand
desktop computer
what a
days.
big
Woo.
deal the computer in every residence hall room was. Like
It
before the
was
laptop
amazing.
program, that was a really big deal because that was, $3,000 or whatever for a terrible
Yes.
computer, but they were really expensive comparatively.
And you had to like schedule who was going to work on their paper when.
Mhm.
But it was like so much better than having to go to the computer lab across campus or whatever. So that's what brought me up to Northwest. And then, so I was going to teach math, but I thought I'm going to still take Spanish classes too because I like it. And then I thought I want to study abroad. So I spent as, and I kind of planned my classes out so that I was going to minor in Spanish. That's what I decided to do. I was going to minor in Spanish. And I planned out my classes so that if I had extra classes that didn't transfer when I got back from Spain, I would have time that last semester to kind of take extra stuff. So I didn't have a full semester. My second semester, my senior year, is kind of going to kind of be, if I need extra stuff, I'll take it then. So my junior year, I went to Spain for a semester and studied Spanish history, Spanish art, Spanish music, Spanish language. I think those were my four classes, and had an amazing time. Traveled on the weekends to different cities in Spain and loved it, and it was amazing. And then I came home and all of my classes transferred. And so I didn't actually get a minor in Spanish. I ended up with a major in Spanish. And that meant that I also had some free time that second semester. And so I took fun classes. One of them was a class that was for elementary and middle school teachers. And it's like learning math, but with manipulatives with toys. And so I got to play with math toys all the time. And that was a lot of fun. I get to teach that class now, and I like teaching that class. So I ended up graduating with a double major, planning on teaching math, but I also had a Spanish major. And when it came time to graduate and apply for jobs, believe it or not, there were no math openings in Northwest Missouri. Like at that time, math teachers were pretty sought after too, but for whatever reason, there were no math teachers in Northwest Missouri. And I couldn't decide, do I want to go back home? Do I want to go somewhere else? Do I want to stay here in Northwest Missouri? And I decided to stay here. And there were two Spanish openings here. And I thought, well, I'm going to forget Spanish someday and I won't be able to teach it someday. But I probably won't forget math and not be able to teach it someday. So now would be a good time to teach Spanish. So I did. I taught Spanish at Maryville High School for 2 years and worked on my master's in math education while I was doing that. So,
Hold on. I just have to make one observation, and I kind of love
yes,
this. Like, I'm going to make my life choices based on which subject I'm going to forget first. That's actually super self-aware and like very pragmatic. And I just really love that. I'm going to take that nugget and like figure out how to use that in my own life. So thank you.
okay.
You
You're
can keep
welcome.
going.
I just want to say shout out to that teacher that was like, how can I get out of teaching a class for a day? Let's have this freshman teach my class. Like that was, one of those things that probably, an arbitrary decision will give this a try and change really the course of your life. That's really amazing. So, and I think, students who want to become teachers don't think about the huge impact they have on their students with, things like that, that maybe was just a on the spur of the moment decision, but can, totally change somebody's life.
Lots
That's
of
really
ripple
amazing.
effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, good point. That's true.
So you
So
were
should I
teaching,
continue?
yeah, you were teaching Spanish at Maryville High School and getting your master's in math ed. What happened after that? So,
Well, then somebody retired at Northwest. And so I thought, well, it's been fun teaching Spanish. Let's try to go
Adios,
teach
amigos.
math. Adios, amigos. So I started teaching here at Northwest and taught general education math classes. And I loved the fact that I didn't have to eat lunch. Like I was shoveling everything into my mouth so fast. But, people sign up to take Spanish because they want to take Spanish. And people that are taking general education math classes typically aren't super excited to be taking general education math classes. So it was a challenge to help them see the beauty in math. And I always talk about that, the beauty, that math is beautiful and that there is beauty in math. And the day I got a comment on one of my course evaluations that said, I didn't believe her when she said there's joy and beauty in math, but she's right, there is. I thought I better just retire right now. Like I can't get any better than that. So that's what I've been trying to do since, is help people see the joy and beauty in math. And so while I was teaching those undergraduate classes, general education classes, I thought, I like this, being here, and I'd like to continue being here. So I got my doctorate in math education, and I went to UMKC for that, which involved commuting. So I would record my notes and listen to them as I would drive back and forth to study for my comprehensive exams or whatever, and got my doctorate. And
How
then
long did
somebody
it
else
take you?
retired.
Yeah. How long did it take you?
It took me, I think, 2 years to get, 2.5 years to get my doctorate. Yep.
And
Kind of
what,
worked
so can
hard.
you tell me tell me a little bit about sort of your decision process behind, because you're teaching already, right?
Mhm.
Like, what was the thought process behind, oh, I want to go ahead and continue my education here? Like, career-wise, what was that going to open up for you?
It would open up more classes that I could teach, and it could give me kind of some stability in at Northwest. So I thought, and it could kind of like get me into kind of some more leadership roles in professional organizations. And so just open more doors to have my doctorate and more long term and opportunities. So as an instructor without a doctorate, I pretty much was going to be teaching those same classes, but I could open up to teaching more of the education, the teaching future teachers classes. And that also means I could teach in the graduate program, which I have really enjoyed the last few years too.
Because to go back to your previous comment, usually students who are going to go into a graduate program choose to be there and want to be there, right? So
Mhm.
that's a whole different experience of teaching than maybe, again, gen ed math classes, right?
True, true. But they're elementary teachers, and a lot of times elementary teachers are scared of math. And so in the comments that I get as they're introducing themselves, well, particularly the last couple years. So Missouri started a program with some extra COVID money to pay for teachers to get their certification as an elementary math specialist. And thankfully, I had just kind of revamped our program for elementary teachers to get their elementary math specialists to make it online. And because we had revamped that, it like opened the door that we could at Northwest bring in 150 teachers overnight to start our program. And a lot of them, were doing it because the state was paying for them to do it, not because it was something they really wanted to sign up for necessarily. But I loved it because they were like, I've never been strong at teaching math, or I'm kind of scared of teaching math, or I know teaching math is my weakest area. I much prefer teaching whatever. And by the end of the program, they were like, okay, I can do this. And I'm going to go help all my colleagues do better at teaching math. And this has totally changed my teaching practices. And it just was fun to see that growth in them, as they worked on that. And so I kind of liked it that that first go around wasn't that, even though, yes, they were signing up for a program. It's not like they thought, hey, in my free time, I'm going to choose to pay for this master's degree. Um, it, it allowed for more growth than I think they anticipated.
Can you, this is an interesting topic, and can you elaborate on your observations of why people are scared of math? I mean, that's like you said, seems to be kind of a common kind of thread in terms of like discipline wise, and especially teaching teachers. I guess the core of me feels like you might have some insight into this. So how can we understand this fear of math and change that mindset from fear to seeing the joy and the beauty in math?
We all start off as pretty inquisitive, curious people, even in math. And kindergartners, enjoy doing their math and counting and adding, and it's they can be curious. And then at some point, we lose that curiosity in math. And unfortunately, I think a lot of it is because we're taught this is what you're supposed to do it this way. Don't forget to carry the one, or like when you're multiplying by a 2-digit number, put an X right here when you move over. And, just like don't forget these steps and these rules instead of using our own knowledge and our own curiosity to explore and learn and figure stuff out and make sense of stuff. And so math is often taught as here are the steps to follow, do it this way,
Or
don't,
you're wrong, right?
or you're wrong.
Like you're wrong, like nothing about this is right.
Yes. And if we could approach math as let's spend some time exploring, let's figure this out, let's try some things. Oh, this didn't work. Let me try something else instead. And like engage that curiosity that people have and engage their inquisitiveness more and let that be a safe place to explore. We would like math longer
Mhm.
in life and then appreciate it more. Um, so high school geometry proofs. Like I think most people have this dread of thinking back to their writing proofs in high school geometry. And I just like to approach it as you are given these clues and you like, CSI shows and mystery and solving, police drama shows and stuff. They have to use the clues to get to a conclusion. And that's all proofs are is how can you use the clues that you have and make a case that you're right about whatever conclusion you're drawing. And I think if we just approach it as you can use your brain, you don't have to memorize and do stuff in the right order. It's a much more approachable subject.
Has the methodology of teaching math changed over the years? Because I feel like, I have children who one's in eighth grade and one's in college now, but when they were in elementary school, like it seemed like the way that they were taught to do math was much different than the way I was taught to do math in small Northwest Missouri in the 80s and 90s. So it changed kind of because new math is one of those things you hear sometimes parents complain about, but did that actually happen, or is it just kind of evolving as a methodology to teach how to
Hold
do
on.
this?
I feel like we have to get some doo 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 X
Right.
Files. Did that
Right.
really happen? Doo doo
Yeah.
doo 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 doo.
I think there have always been teachers teaching with this make sense of math and this understanding approach. But not everybody has been teaching that way, and far fewer people learned that way. And so when someone goes in to teach math, they teach it the way they learned it. And so it kind of perpetuates, like we just keep teaching it through this rote memorization style. But it has been evolving, and like the National Councils of Teachers of Mathematics National Councils of Teachers in Mathematics, has been working to help people infuse more understanding in teaching. And so I think what you're describing as the new math is where the ideas, the curriculum kind of caught up with, okay, the curriculum is trying to help us teach with more understanding. And now the job is to get the teachers to make sure they know how to use that curriculum. And a program like the Elementary Math Specialist program helps the teachers to understand more deeply what it is they're teaching. But unfortunately, what happened is we said, hey, teachers, you need to teach this new stuff this new way. And they're like, okay, well, here's what you're supposed to do. Do it like this. We're doing it like this now instead of doing it like that. Well, why are you doing it like this? Well, that's just the new way to do it. So make sure you do it this way instead. Instead of approaching it as we're learning to use numbers flexibly and fluently, and we're learning to kind of do what makes sense and use the strategies that are best for different situations instead of always applying this cookie cutter strategy to every single problem when that's not always the best way to go about it. So new math isn't necessarily new. It's just kind of a new curriculum, a new approach that not everybody has learned how to use effectively. So sign up for the Elementary Math Specialist program and we will
There you
help
go.
you.
Perfect plug. And I think
Jenny
it's
will teach you.
yeah, I think it's interesting because that's kind of how I always did math. I used to lose points in math class because I'd have the right answer, but I didn't get there the right way. And it's like, well, but it's easier for me to figure 12.5% is 10% and then 5% and then half of the five get you the 12. Like that's how I always did it.
That is what we want people to be doing.
Right. And
Yes.
I used to get yelled at by my math teachers because, well, that's not how you do it. It's like, but it works. Like, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I just think it's interesting. I actually had a better time helping my kids do math than I did when I was in elementary school because it's like, well, this makes more sense. So, and you can actually see it instead of this is the way, like you said, the kind of the dogma of you have to do it this specific prescribed way. That never really worked for me, but I was a very
Well,
challenging
and
student too. So,
but if today's textbook lesson is to teach you to do 10% and then 5% and half of 5% and add those together, and we teach it as this is the only way to do it. Now
right.
tomorrow you have to multiply by 12 and divide by 100, and that's the only way to do it. Like it loses its value that way too. So the benefit is when we say, hey, there's this way to do it, there's this way to do it. When would it be better to choose this, and when would it be better to choose this? I sat next to a guy on a plane one time who saw me grading some math work, and he said, oh, geez, what do you think about that new math? I said, well, let me give you an example. I would prefer that if my students were taking 100 minus 2, that they would just know, like, it's only 2 away from 100. It's just 98. We don't have to go back and cross off the 1 and put a 10 and then cross off the 10 and put a 9 and cross off the 0 and put. And he was like, well, yeah, obviously. I said, so this is what we're trying to teach. I said, or if you're doing this fraction problem. He said, well, I would just do it like this. I was like, exactly. So the way you are thinking is what we want everybody to think instead of you have to do it this way. He's like, well, I thought it was you have to do it all these 10 different ways. No, we just want to give people options and help them think fluently.
As long as no one has to memorize multiplication tables ever again, that's justice has been served. So, so I'm interested. You started off teaching high school. Was the goal to be a college professor, or were you did it evolve as you went through? I'm using evolve a lot today. I don't know why. It must be on my brain.
Evolution
But
is happening.
but I mean, was the goal to be a college professor or to be a high school teacher, and then that changed, or were you just kind of go with the flow and I'm going to teach and whatever that looks like, I'm good with?
Yeah, I think my goal was to just teach high school. My advisor at Northwest said that her advisor said, you're going to go on and get your doctorate. And she said, no, I'm not going to get my doctorate. And she said, so you never know which ones of you are going to get your doctorate. And I said, she's wrong. Like that might have been what she thought, but I know that I'm not going to get my doctorate, and here I am. So just kind of whatever it just, when the door opened to come to Northwest and teach college, I was like, that's a good idea. I'll try that. And then I guess since I'm teaching college, I better get my doctorate. And so I'll do that. And didn't really ever think about teaching in an online program or teaching in a graduate program, but the opportunity presented itself, and it's been enjoyable. And so just as things came up, took the opportunities and have enjoyed them.
I'm also very interested in your kind of intersection between like language and math. So sort of this idea of people like to put themselves in boxes, right? They like to say, I'm good at math or I'm bad at math, which I have lots of commentary on that, but they often don't, if I'm good at math, that means I must be bad at creativity or arts or whatever, right? Or languages. And so I'm interested in sort of how your exploration of Spain and learning, Spanish and how you've kind of integrated that into your sort of ideas about math, I guess.
Well, first, I just randomly start speaking Spanish sometimes in class to get attention. And so that's probably the main way
Do you
that I
still
go about it.
speak a lot of Spanish? Like, do you speak Spanish at home or do you like just try
I
to stay?
try. I try when I meet somebody in town, then I try to speak with them. Yeah, I enjoy it. I try to keep up with it. So, but now I'm trying Italian on Duolingo instead of Spanish, and I feel like I'm kind of cheating because it's so similar. It's kind of
Very
easy
close,
to,
yeah.
yeah. Um, so I think it's just kind of being open and interested, and not limiting myself to, well, I'm a math person, so I can't do other things. And it's interesting. A few years ago, we had, I think, at least two other faculty members in the math department who actually had undergraduate degrees in music. And they then
Huh.
got graduate degrees in math and are math professors. And I don't know how many people in our department are in choirs or bands. So there are one colleague during COVID, he decided to learn how to juggle. So it's kind of just like have extra stuff than your job, have extra areas that you study and are curious about, and explore those too. Don't limit yourself.
That
That's
kind
great.
of that kind of dovetails into, we really always like to ask faculty advice for students, or maybe things that they wish they would have known when they started their kind of educational journey. So any advice to share?
I have, I don't remember who told me this idea, but when you graduate, you could have this sense that like it all, like you have this degree now and all that and that's quite a bit because you got the degree. And I think when I was teaching Spanish, I kind of had this like, I went to Northwest Education Program. I know so much. I'm so good. And I didn't take advantage of learning from my colleagues as much as I could have. And there's still so much to learn. And I have still been learning so much. And just today, so one of the classes I teach, my students do a lot of teaching, and today someone was teaching a lesson, and I apparently I got like, had a surprised look on my face, and they were saying, oh, apparently Dr. Wall just made a discovery. And I was like, yes, like it was so cool to see how these two things went together, and I wasn't expecting to see it come out in the arithmetic or the equation the way that it did. And so just know that you're going to keep on learning. You're not done when you get that paper. You're going to keep learning more from your colleagues, from your mentors, and there might be more degrees ahead of you at Northwest or elsewhere. And there's just, you, you're going to be a lifelong learner. And that's how I think you'll be most successful, is to kind of be open to what others have to teach you.
That's really powerful.
Super solid advice. What else,
Anything
Hannah?
else?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Any words of wisdom? Maybe tell me, I'm very interested in this idea of beauty and math. Tell me a thing or two that one of the ways that you enter into the beauty of math.
Well, so I'm looking at that plant over your shoulder and thinking about the Fibonacci sequence and the um, golden ratio, and in what ways it shows up in that plant. Because I was just somebody just shared a podcast with me about the Fibonacci sequence. And by the way, I did my senior project as an undergrad on the golden ratio, which is like the mathematical reason for beauty. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it's also in the mathematics. Like it's like there's something mathematical about beauty. And I still, someone shared this podcast with me the other day, and I just finished listening to it this morning. And there was something new about the Fibonacci sequence that I did not know about, how it showed up in this early poetry, like 700 years before Fibonacci even had the idea
Fibonacci.
of, yeah, before Fibonacci, exactly. And it's just, it's just neat to see all the different ways that the Fibonacci sequence shows up in nature and in art. And I think it's a good way to draw in students who are uninterested in math, to say, you know what, like, let's look at this beautiful picture here and let's do some measurements on it and see that these measurements, if we take the ratio of this measurement to this measurement, do you see that it is the same as when we do this measurement to this measurement? That's called the golden ratio. Like, the artist chose to do it in this way, so this ratio would keep showing up. Or if there's a, a gardener or an agriculture student, you know, the reason that these leaves grow the way that they do is to get the most sunlight. Like, if leaves grew on top of each other, they wouldn't get sunlight. So they kind of have to turn. And you know, the angle that they turn is the golden ratio. Like, it allows for all of the plants, all the leaves, to get as much sun as they can. And just, it's amazing.
Mind blown, right?
I know, exactly. So many different ways that we can see science and math and art coming together and kind of just tickle different parts of our brains.
In that way, and maybe this is a common way of looking at it, understanding math as a language, right? Looking at things mathematically as an aspect of language, right? So you mentioned Spanish. Math is also a language, right? They talk about programming languages and computer science, highly interrelated to math. Um, it's just an interesting, like it's a different way of thinking about the way our brain maybe processes language or knowledge systems with that. So fascinating.
The opening speaker at the most recent National Council of Teachers of Mathematics conference is an Iranian American who lived in, I don't know how many different countries growing up. And she talked about how every country she lived in, the math class was the safe space for her,
Huh.
because 3 + 2 still equals 5 here in this math class. Everything else is so different. They eat different foods, they dress differently. Everything is so different, but I can like rely on the security and safety of math. And so um, it's not necessarily that she would have become a math teacher and the National Teacher of the Year a few years ago, but it was because of her love of math, but it was just because it was her safe space and she spent so much time and wanted to help other people feel safe in a math class too.
Well, there
Wow.
you go. No reason to fear math. It's safe. So it's your
It's safe.
constant, you're
Oh,
safe.
that's
Love it.
so good.
Yes.
Yes,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much
exactly.
for your time. This was great. We really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, that will do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up below. That helps out. Also, if you've not done so yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find Behind the Bearcat on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Plus, the audio podcast comes out on Fridays on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching Behind the Bearcat, and as always, we'll talk to you next time.